We got to change that. Either we got to change that or somebody better start funding the jails and train the police officers to do somebody else's job, because that's what's happening. Our default mental health care is in the county jails, the city jails, and the prison system of Alabama. And there's a trial going on right now that's probably going to establish that. And we'll see. Now, this money is important because, as most of you know, there's a decision in Alabama called the Wyatt decision. And narrowly, that decision is about releasing people from Bryce. It says that you got to treat people correctly. There are better ways to do it. It's called community mental health. And of course there's better ways to do it. I can tell you that if the family member is involved in the treatment of someone mentally ill, the doctor learns what's going on, the patient feels involved with the family, and you can help bring the family back together. Isn't that right, Mark? It works. But if you just send somebody in there and the family's not involved and nobody knows what's going on, the doctor's like a veterinarian. He's trying to figure out what woggle of the dog's head means what. We can do better than that. Don't make these police officers do that. It's not fair to them. I personally have called the police to come get my son, who was completely out of control. And I applaud the Vestavia Force because they're pretty darn well trained. And I watched them do the right thing. And guess where they took my son? To the hospital. And he was in great shape in 5 days. I had to push him a little bit because I took this medicine with me right behind them and said, here's what you got to do. And they said, we don't do that. And I said, well, put it back in the car and let's roll over the hill to Brookwood. Right place, right, Zia? And he did great. They did it, and they were happy to do it, and I'm so proud of those guys. But you got to have some money, and we got to find the way to do it. All right, next slide, please, Wanda. Crisis intervention training. Sam Cochran, a great friend of NAMI, is going to talk to you. A little bit later, Corporal Cotner from Dallas is going to talk to you about a program that they believe absolutely, 100% totally works. Will it save everybody? No. But it works. I've got my pen handed to me personally by Sam Cochran for answering a question correctly. I do this stuff. And it says, CIT, more than just training. That's the important part. More than just training. It's an attitude. It says, we can do this a better way. I was fortunate to speak to a CIT graduation a couple of months ago. It was a very interactive class. And there was a Montgomery policeman there, a big strapping sergeant, who was answering a lot of questions, very involved in the class. And so while I was talking, I was trying to make the point of how important it was to leave the class and implement these procedures and talk to other people about getting the training and make this a real thing in their police department. And I was making the point about you've got to de-escalate. You can't be in their face. And as I was making that point, I was easing my way over to this sergeant who was seated off to my left. And I lunged at him and had my finger up, make like a gun, right in his face. And he pushed his chair back 3 feet. And I just looked back at the audience and said, that's my point. Now put somebody that's scared to death there, doesn't understand you, may not even be able to understand English language because he doesn't understand much of what's going on. Put a gun in their face and see how they react. There are ways to do that, and Sam's going to talk about this. And we're so thankful for Sam and Corporal Cartner and all the other speakers that came here to do this. But CIT is more than just training. And yes, Sam, I'll put it on in a minute. I just wanted to hold it up. It decreases number of injuries to officers. Like I said, that officer doesn't leave that day and not think about that incident again. That'll haunt them the rest of their life. We can prevent injuries to the officer force, the guys on the beat. Decrease use of force. Imagine not being able to understand what's going on, that you're so confused you're talking gibberish. It's very difficult to understand what you're saying. And all of a sudden, somebody with guns grabs you, handcuffs you, your hands behind you, and throws you in the back of a police car because you're sick. That's what we do. That's the system we have. It even shocked me the first time I saw it. But that's what we've set out for everybody to do. If you have a heart attack, you get in the back of an ambulance with sheets and doctors and medics, and they take you to a nice hospital. That's not what we do. No, sir. Improves use of alternatives to arrest and jail. There are ways, and these gentlemen are going to talk to you about it. Decrease time officers spend in the crisis unit. They need to be back on the street. Let the people whose job that is take over. But right now, let the police do it. It's in their budget, surely. Reduce myths and stigma of mental illness among law enforcement. My favorite story about stigma and mental illness is to reverse it. Many, many times I've been in court and the judge is having a conversation with my client about understanding the consequences of his action. And I love to interrupt the judge respectfully and say, Judge, respectfully, you are trying to have a rational discussion with someone who is completely irrational. And this is an entirely irrational discussion. Come on, let's get real. Doesn't work all the time, I can tell you. Improved relationships for officers and communities. There is no reason for incidents to occur and for the police to be blamed. You know what that makes me feel like? That makes me feel like getting spit on in the Chicago O'Hare Airport coming home from Vietnam because I was a soldier. That's what it feels like. They are honorable people, sworn to do a duty, and the majority of them do it very well every day, just like my son. And we have to protect them, and we have to support them. And there's a way to do it. But we have to exercise our voice and push that vote. Give the support to these legislators. Don't let them stand on an island alone trying to cry into the dark. We have to help them educate their fellow legislators so we can make this happen. It can happen if we get off our duffs and do the right thing. As Pogo said, a lot of you are old enough to know who Pogo was. We have met the enemy, and he is us. And if we don't vote, we can't say a word about it. And if we don't support our legislators, we can't say a word about it. And if we don't support the commissioner and the governor, we got nothing to say. CIT benefits the individuals and their families. How many people here, raise your hand, are a family member of someone living with mental illness? To put it bluntly, in crisis, it sucks, doesn't it? There is I apologize for the language. There's no other way to describe it. I have been in active combat. I have tried cases for over 40 years. My whole life is wound up in pressure. There is not 1 ounce of training I ever got or one ability to cope with the pressure that comes with dealing with someone in mental illness and crisis. It is awful. You are scared to death that you're not going to get them to the hospital, that they're going to get out somewhere, that they're going to commit a crime and get arrested, or they're going to do something they'll be sorry, or the absolute worst, get themselves killed, either by suicide or by doing the wrong thing. Your every waking moment is devoted to avoiding that. And sometimes it goes on for months. It rips families apart. It rips individuals apart. That's our citizenry. 20% of our citizens. Think how many people in this room fit into that 1 in 5. And we're just going to let it happen when we can prevent it? No dice. Not while I'm still here. We're going to talk. Better relationships between the individual living with mental illness and law enforcement officers. I've seen that happen so many times with the right approach. It is really, really great. It is so great to listen to a district attorney or the arresting officer talk about, we're going to get them well, they've improved, they've done this, they've done that, rather than the initial thing that I hear with someone who's untrained, well, we had to do something, they were acting crazy. If I've heard that once, I've heard it 1,000 times, and I have the same answer every time. Officer, did it ever occur to you that they weren't acting? Mr. District Attorney, did it ever occur to you that they weren't acting? Because they're not. Remove the stigma of unnecessary incarceration in local jails. That sucks too. Jail is not a fun place. I know people think it's a cushy place to go. I told my son, the first time you go to jail, son, you're going to have a wake-up moment. And he called me from the jail the first time he walked in with his badge. He called me from the inside. He said, Dad, you're absolutely right. When that door clanks, it is a sobering experience. And I always check before I go in, because right in here, I got my get out of jail card, and make sure I've got it when I go in. Improved access to treatment. Increased chance that living individuals with mental illness will receive continuous care. Without those things, we're just blowing in the wind. We're walking past the cemetery whistling. Next slide. Is that the last one? All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up here shortly. The bill we have for CIT is a simple bill. No bells and whistles, no jumping up and down and saying you got to do this, you got to do that. It says, in the future, after the passage of this bill, CIT training for all law enforcement officers in Alabama will be mandatory. It sets a delay time. Thank you. Don't thank me. Mike Ball is going to be our sponsor. He's securing other sponsors. Is Mike here yet? All right, he's our sponsor. He'll be here later. A big committee has worked on making this statute, the bill, as understandable and simple as we could to get it passed. But it will require those coming into law enforcement after the enforcement date to be trained sooner, and give a delayed date to phase in for the rest of the officers. But that's going to happen. The program is a 40-hour program. It's an incredibly fine program. I've gone through some of the aspects of it with Sam and with Corporal Cotner. They have all kinds of scenarios they go through. They prepare them for the real life. We teach a guy how to shoot, and the most common thing he's going to run into, we don't talk about that much. One of the young men in that class that I talked to about a month and a half ago